As I mentioned earlier, peace activist and poet Mattie Stepanek was remembered this week at a memorial mass in his home parish in Maryland. It has been 18 years since Mattie left us, but his message of peace remains as vital and relevant today as ever. I sat down with his mother, Dr. Jeni Stepanek, in 2018 to talk about her son and his message. Jeni, Mattie would have been 28 years old this July 17th. It's a big day, which we're going to talk about in a minute. What do you want people to know about he and his message all these years later?
I would say that his message is as valid, as necessary, and as real today as it was when he was sharing it. Hope is real, and peace is possible, and life is worthy. And I think the more we learn in our world, the more we grow forward, the more things like social media connect us, the more important it becomes for us to understand the importance of peace and our personal choices in what we say, in what we do, and how we interact with people. And I think that's really where we are now, is bringing peace up to date and making it relevant to youth and adults today.
Mm-hmm. I am always amazed, just seeing you looking so great, so engaged, so vibrant. People wouldn't know that since we last saw you on the show, you've been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. You're battling neuromuscular disease. What of Mattie's message or words have inspired you to go on, to continue this celebration and battle?
When I was going through chemotherapy a couple of years ago, I actually would blog every week, and I would find something that Mattie wrote and create an entire blog based on that, because Mattie inspired me to believe that hope is real. Hope is not a magical cure, it's not a fix, it's not a miracle that's going to heal you, but hope anchored in faith, anchored in finding some reason to be grateful, or even a source of service for someone else, even in moments of suffering, that can get you into some next moment, can help you deal with even the worst pain. So Mattie inspired me to really root myself in hope, not an illusion, but in the hope that somebody beats the odds, in the hope that even with progressive diagnoses, that I have purpose, and that purpose can be to serve God and to serve others, and to be a source of hope and peace for our world, just as Mattie was.
One of the things I loved about Mattie's message, more importantly Mattie's example and yours, is that despite the challenges you were dealing with or that he was dealing with, you're focused really on the other people and on others. And tell the story of the day that the Oklahoma City bombing happened. He's what, 4 years old?
He was 4 years old. It was in April of 1995. And he had been watching something on TV, and it went off, and the news came on, and it was about the Oklahoma bombing. I quickly turned it off and tried to explain to him what had happened. But in that brief amount of time, he had already seen these devastating images of children and adults who died, and who were going to be survivors and living with the pain. And I talked to him about praying for the survivors, praying for the victims. And he said that's important. We can pray for the families, we can pray for them, but we need to really pray for the people who did this, because they're the ones that don't have peace in their hearts. We need to pray for people to have peace so that this stops. And he was as concerned about whoever caused this violence as he was about the children and the adults and the survivors, in a different way. It was a different type of concern, a different type of prayer, but in his heart, Jesus died for sinners, and he wanted the sinners to have peace in their heart and to understand why this was wrong, why no matter what you're going through, this is not the right choice to deal with whatever your reality is or whatever your anger or issue is.
He also had a pretty dramatic response to 9/11.
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
Well, with 9/11, he watched personal friends literally go up in ash. He had been with firefighters on September 10th, and those very firefighters, some of them were in the World Trade Centers on September 11th and died. And on that day, Mattie wrote a series of poems and passages for peace where he initially struggled, questioning, can we still find peace? Is there national security? Is there hope? Are we ever going to really get along with each other and stop this unnecessary violence? By the end of the day, he wrote a poem called For Our World that essentially says we need to stop, be silent, and notice, and to rebuild the mosaic of humanity, stop shattering it. I would say one of his biggest responses to interrupted peace was actually in 2003 when the United States bombed Iraq. And Mattie was in the hospital at the time, and we were watching some evening TV program and they interrupted. And when he realized what he was seeing was missiles and bombs falling on Iraq, and he had been working so hard to create passages to inspire people to understand why war is an unnecessary evil and that there are ways to resolve our conflicts without bombs. And when he saw these bombs fall, he literally had a physiological response. It changed his heart rate, his blood pressure, his skin turned blue. He was spiritually and emotionally devastated and physically compromised. And doctors and nurses were worried about him. I was quite worried. He really struggled with that, but came back even stronger and committed to sharing a message of peace and sharing it in more and more ways so that people understand how peace begins. Not about pausing violence, but about how to begin peace. How to teach kindness and empathy to children, how to teach thoughtfulness and instill and nurture resilience in children and adults. So he began really breaking down the message into specific elements of hope and peace so that people could better understand.
You mentioned empathy, and he had it in amazing ways. I mean, even when he was struggling with imminent death, choking on his trachea, battling in and out of really, he crossed over to the other side and came back a few times. Tell me about that, the empathy you saw there in the hospital room.
In the hospital room. I had seen empathy in Mattie from the time he was literally 13 months old at a church picnic where he showed empathy for a toddler who was crying, and he comforted her and helped her. And I saw that exact same empathy throughout his entire life and the day he died. We knew he was dying. We didn't know it would be that day, but we knew he was gasping for breath, his bones were broken, and he was struggling literally for every single breath. And the baby in the next bed in the ICU was crying and crying. And Mattie started calling out, "Nurse, nurse, nurse," because he couldn't even really speak well anymore. And the nurse came running in and said, "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" And he said, the baby. And she said, "What's wrong? Is the crying bothering you?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Hold the baby. The baby is the future. The baby has purpose. Comfort the baby. Comfort the baby." And that nurse started crying. And she picked up the baby, and Mattie said, "Sing." And so she sang to the baby. And Mattie died within 24 hours of this happening. But he was so concerned about this baby knowing you matter, even though you're in a hospital and you're suffering and you're in pain, but you matter, you have purpose, you are loved, you are cherished, and somebody's going to comfort you and hold you. And that was within the day of his death.
You have some concerns that people think of Mattie as a celebrity and that Oprah is responsible for him in many ways.
I think when people hear Mattie's name, they think of him as Oprah's kid, and I think that's lovely. I think that's wonderful. And Mattie and Oprah were very close. They were sincerely friends and loved each other, and to this day she still loves him. And people think Mattie wanted to be on her show because he had poetry books. Really, his wish was that Mattie said when he was 6 years old, okay, and he wasn't on her show until he was 11.
Right.
When Mattie was 6 years old, he came to me and he said, God put Oprah Winfrey and me on earth at the same time with purpose. I'm thinking, oh, did he now?
Really?
Of course, yeah.
Because he'd read a little biography of her.
He had read a little book about
bought.
her, and it was like an aha moment for him. Like, this is the person that's going to amplify my purpose. He said, God gave me a purpose of shaping a message of hope and peace so that people can understand what God wants them to understand. He said, I shape it for children, for adults, I shape it for Christians, for non-Christians. He said, I shape hope and peace into something that people understand how they can be a source of hope and peace, even in hopeless moments, even in moments of suffering, even when there's war and trauma. But he said, what I need is to get this message out to the world, because otherwise I've got this message, I've done what God's asked me to do. I have been a messenger, I've shaped it, but then it just sits in my computer.
And he saw Oprah as the vehicle of that heart song,
and so he saw that people turned to Oprah for inspiration. And when he saw that Oprah Winfrey was a person that knew what it was like to suffer, she was not born rich. She knew what it was like to suffer and rise up out of the ashes. So he believed that she would understand the message, and he wanted her to share the message that he had shaped. It was a bonus that she had him on the show, and it was an unusual situation that she realized he was real. He was not a poet kid. He was not a child whose mother wanted him to be on Oprah. He was really a messenger of hope and peace. And that's why they became friends. That's why he was on her show multiple times, not because he was a cute celebrity kid, but because he was an authentic bearer of a message of hope and peace.
Jerry Lewis also had him on as his MDA spokesman for a number of years. He was often on the telethon. I want to show people a little clip of that.
You let them know what life is about because of your presence and your courage.
Life is a gift, true. It's hard, and it's not always the easiest thing. But if it wasn't, you know what? The challenges in life are a part of our life, and that's how we learn. And some of us are meant to have a disease, and some of us, like you, are meant to help fight it. All of us have a reason, and we have to choose to always live our lives to the fullest. No one is better or worse than anyone else. We are different and beautiful.
And I think that is an important and powerful message. People look at children with disabilities and see them as less than perfect. They see children with developmental disabilities as children that need fixing, that need help. The help that all children need, with or without disabilities, medical, physical, spiritual, or cognitive, the help they need is to become their best self, to realize their purpose and their gifts from God and celebrate those gifts in a way that makes the world a better place, a fuller place. And so when you're born with a disability, yes, there's suffering involved, but it's not a mistake. It's not that God made an oops and this child is less than another child. And Mattie understood that. And he cherished all children, all people.
Now I see you struggling against infirmity and time to continue this message, to spread it. What is that heart song that you want people to hear? Both Mattie's and yours.
Well, I'll begin with mine. Mine is simply that you matter, and each moment matters. And we can't control whether a moment is going to be one with suffering or one worthy of celebration. All we can have a choice in is what we do with that moment and with the next moment, how we move through it. all we can do is choose to be kind, choose to reflect God's presence in any moment, choose to, of course we all hope for another moment. I have prayed to overcome the odds. I've prayed for more time. I've been told several times for different reasons in the last 3 years that my time is up. And yes, I'm human. I pray for more time. I am looking forward to being with my children again. I do hope that I see the face of God. But life is so worthy, even amid suffering, that if I can find a way to be a source of hope for someone else, and I learned this from Mattie. All right, Mattie's heart song was to be a source of hope and peace for other people, so that it becomes real. If they don't believe it's real, be real for them. And that was why Oprah loved him. He was real. And I've learned that as well, is that if I can be helpful to you, hope for you, if I can bring you a moment of peace, then I'm reflecting God's presence on earth even amid challenges. And that makes life worthy for me and for you. You matter. Every moment matters.
You can learn more about Mattie's work on behalf of world peace, as well as the progress of his cause for sainthood. It's at MattieMatters.org.